Charles Watson-Wentworth, 2nd Marquess of Rockingham, KGPC, styled the Honourable Charles Watson-Wentworth before 1733, Viscount Higham between 1733 and 1746, Earl of Malton between 1746 and 1750 and the Marquess of Rockingham in 1750, was a British Whig statesman, most notable for his 2 terms as Prime Minister of Great Britain. He became the patron of many Whigs, known as the Rockingham Whigs, and served as a leading Whig grandee. He served in only 2 high offices during his lifetime, but was nonetheless very influential during his 1.5 years of service. Early life, 1730–1751, a descendant of the first Earl of Strafford, Lord Rockingham was brought up at the family home of Wentworth Woodhouse near Rotherham in South Yorkshire. He was educated at the Westminster School. During the Jacobite Rising of 1745, Rockingham's father made him a colonel and organised volunteers to defend the country against the Young Pretender. Rockingham's sister Mary wrote to him from London, saying the king did not doubt but that you was as good a colonel as he has in his army, and his other sister Charlotte wrote that you have gained immortal honour and I have every day the satisfaction of hearing 20 handsome things said of the Blues and their colonel. The march of the Jacobite army into northern England caused the Wentworth household to flee to Doncaster, and Rockingham rode from Wentworth to Carlisle to join the Duke of Cumberland in pursuit of the Young Pretender. Rockingham did this without parental consent, and Cumberland wrote to Rockingham's father, saying that his zeal on this occasion showed the same principles fixed that you yourself have given such strong proofs of. Rockingham wrote to his father that Cumberland blamed me for my disobedience, yet as I came with a design of saving my king and country, it greatly palliated my offence. Rockingham's mother wrote to his father, though I hope you won't tell it him, never anything met with such general applause. In short, he is the hero of these times, and his Majesty talks of this young subject, in such terms, as must please you to hear. In the drawing-room no 2 people talk together, but he makes part of the discourse. In April 1746 Rockingham's father was made a Marquis, and Rockingham himself assumed the courtesy title of Earl of Malton. These honours came about due to the patronage of Henry Pelham. At this time Rockingham was travelling across Europe under the tutorship of George Combe, as his father had decided against sending him to Cambridge. During his stay in Rome, Rockingham noted that amongst Englishmen Whigs outnumbered Jacobites 4-1, and there were no persons of rank about the Pretender, and that the vile spirit of Jacobitism was greatly declining. When in Herrenhausen, Hanover, Rockingham met George II and made an impression. The king told Rockingham's uncle Henry Finch that he had never seen a finer or a more promising youth. In September 1750, 2 months before his father's death, he was raised to the peerage of Ireland in his own right as Baron Malton and Earl Malton. Early political career, 1751 65. On May 13, 1751, Rockingham inherited his father's estates. The rents from the land in Yorkshire, Northamptonshire and Ireland gave him an annual income of £20,000. He also controlled both of the borough parliamentary seats of Malton and 1 seat for the single-member borough of Higham Ferrers, along with 23 livings and 5 chaplaincies in the church. In July he was appointed Lord Lieutenant and Custos Rotulorum of the West Riding in Yorkshire, Lord Lieutenant of York City, and Custos Rotulorum of York City and County. In 1751 52 Rockingham joined White's, the Jockey Club and the Royal Society. Rockingham's maiden speech was on March 17, 1752 in support of the bill which disposed of Scottish lands confiscated in the aftermath of the Jacobite Rising of 1745. He wanted the lands cultivated by people employed in husbandry and handicrafts, who repudiated plunder, rapine and rebellion. He said the Highlanders have remained in their ancient state, prolific, bold, idle, and consequently hives of rebellion. He compared his favoured policy with the policy which his ancestor Lord Strafford had used in Ireland. Rockingham's speech was not well received, with Horace Walpole criticising him for venturing into a debate so much above his force. Rockingham's uncle William Murray, the Solicitor General, believed him to be poorly educated, so he employed Combe as Rockingham's tutor again. Rockingham was for 4 months to study Demosthenes for oratory, to learn the histories of the Assyrian, Persian, Greek and Roman empires along with modern history, Murray wanted Rockingham to take after Sir Walter Raleigh. In 1752, Rockingham was appointed Lord of the Bedchamber to George II and married Mary Bright. In 1753 the Rockingham Club was formed, containing the first Rockingham Whigs. Rockingham hired James Stewart to paint portraits of William III and George II for the club rooms. The club held monthly meetings and a list written in June 1754 showed it had 133 members. In 1755 the king appointed him to the honorary office of Vice Admiral of the North. During a French invasion scare in 1756 Rockingham raised a volunteer militia at his own expense, and when rioting broke out against army enlistments Rockingham restored order without the use of military force in Sheffield. The Secretary at War, Lord Barrington, wrote to him, "You are the only instance of a Lord Lieutenant's exerting the civil authority upon these occasions." Rockingham asked in 1760 to be made a Knight of the Order of the Garter and the king consented. In 1760, George II died, and his grandson ascended the throne as George III. Rockingham was allied to the Duke of Newcastle and his supporters, whilst the new king had a favourite in Lord Bute. Rockingham believed that Bute and his supporters wanted to take the whole administration and government of this country into their hands, and wanted Newcastle to resign now before he would be inevitably disposed of. Rockingham believed that the revolution in British politics since George III's accession was harmful to the country, since it removed the Whigs from their ascendancy which had settled the constitution and secured the House of Hanover on the British throne. Rockingham wrote to Newcastle, "Without flattery to your grace, I must look and ever shall upon you and your connections as the solid foundations on which every good which has happened to this country since the glorious Revolution have been erected. What a medley of government is probably soon to take place, and when it does what an alarm will ensue." Rockingham resigned as Lord of the Bedchamber on November 3, 1762 in protest at the King's policies, and other Whigs associated with the Duke of Newcastle did the same. Your next month the King removed Rockingham from the office of Lord Lieutenant of the West Riding, Lord Lieutenant of the City and County of York, as Custos Rotulorum of the North and West Riding, as Custos Rotulorum of the City and County of York, and as Vice Admiral of York City and County. Over the next several years, Rockingham gradually became the leader of those of Newcastle's supporters who were unwilling to reconcile themselves to the premierships of Bute and his successor, George Grenville. Prime Minister, 1765–1766, the King's dislike, as well as Grenville's general lack of parliamentary support, led to his dismissal in 1765, and, following negotiations conducted through the medium of the King's uncle, the Duke of Cumberland, Lord Rockingham was appointed Prime Minister. Rockingham recovered the honours of which he had been deprived in 1762. Rockingham appointed his allies Henry Seymour Conway and the Duke of Grafton as Secretaries of State. Also at this time, Edmund Burke, the Irish statesman and philosopher, became his private secretary and would remain a lifelong friend, political ally and advisor until Rockingham's premature death in 1782. Rockingham's administration was dominated by the American issue. Rockingham wished for repeal of the Stamp Act 1765 and won a Commons vote on the repeal resolution by 275 to 167 in 1766. However, Rockingham also passed the Declaratory Act, which asserted that the British Parliament had the right to legislate for the American colonies in all cases whatsoever. However, internal dissent within the cabinet led to his resignation and the appointment of Lord Chatham as Prime Minister. Opposition, 1766–1782, Rockingham spent the next 16 years in opposition. He was a keen supporter of constitutional rights for colonists. Rockingham wrote to Edmund Burke on February 14, 1771, "I fear indeed the future struggles of the people in defence of their constitutional rights will grow weaker and weaker. It is much too probable that the power and influence of the Crown will increase rapidly. We live at the period when for the first time since the Revolution, the power and influence of the Crown is held out, as the main and chief and only support of government. If we do not exert now, we may accelerate the abject state to which the Constitution may be reduced." Rockingham wrote to Augustus Keppel on November 3, 1779, saying that he believed the war against America could not be won, that the government was corrupt but not unpopular, and that the longer this continued the greater the danger to the liberties in the Constitution of Britain. Perhaps a total change of men and measures, and system in the government, of this country might have effect on the councils of some foreign countries. Who might think that it was no longer a court system to combat, but that the whole nation would united and make the utmost efforts. Rockingham was recruited to hunt down the Crag Vale coiners. He had 30 coiners arrested by Christmas Day 1769. Prime Minister, 1782. In 1782 he was appointed Prime Minister for a second time and, upon taking office, pushed for an acknowledgement of the independence of the United States, initiating an end to British involvement in the American War of Independence. Due to rising unemployment, in this second premiership, Rockingham's administration saw the passage of Gilbert's Act, the Relief of the Poor Act 1782, after 17 years of opposing Thomas Gilbert's ideas. This saw the creation of unions of civil parishes, later officially called unions under Gilbert's Act, to provide outdoor relief and set up workhouses. Paul Langford has claimed that the Rockingham administration represented a landmark in constitutional history. The ministerial changes of 1782 involved a more extensive upheaval among office holders than any since 1714, virtually replacing one administration with another drawn from opposition. Rockingham's second term was short-lived, for Lord Rockingham died 14 weeks later at the beginning of July from an influenza epidemic. He was replaced as Prime Minister by Lord Shelburne, who was more reluctant to accept the total independence of America and proposed a form of dominion status. However, by April 1783 succeeded in securing peace with America, and this feat remains his legacy. Rockingham was buried in York Minster in Yorkshire. Legacy: Rockingham's estates, but not his marquisate, passed to his nephew William Fitzwilliam, 4th Earl Fitzwilliam. Burke wrote to him on July 3, 1782, "You are Lord Rockingham in everything. I have no doubt that you will take it in good part, that his old friends, who were attached to him by every tie of affection, and of principle, and among others myself, should look to you, and should not think it an act of forwardness and intrusion to offer you their services." On July 7, 150 supporters of Rockingham met at Fitzwilliam's house and decided to withdraw support for Lord Shelburne's administration. The Old Rockingham party fragmented, with Fox and the Duke of Portland leading a coalition of Whigs. The Whig party further split over the French Revolution, with Burke writing to Fitzwilliam on January 4, 1797, "As to our old friends, they are so many individuals, not a jot more separated from your lordship, than they are from one another. There is no mutual affection, communication, or concert between them." The Whig historian Thomas Babington Macaulay was an admirer of Rockingham and his Whig faction. They were men worthy to have charged by the side of Hampden at Charlegrove, or to have exchanged the last embrace with Russell on the scaffold in Lincoln's Inn Fields. They carried into politics the same high principles of virtue which regulated their private dealings, nor would they stoop to promote even the noblest and most salutary ends by means which honour and probity condemn. Such men were Lord John Cavendish, Sir George Savile, and others whom we hold in honour as the second founders of the Whig party, as the restorers of its pristine health and energy after half a century of degeneracy. The chief of this respectable band was the Marquess of Rockingham, a man of splendid fortune, excellent sense, and stainless character. He was indeed nervous to such a degree that, to the very close of his life, he never rose without great reluctance and embarrassment to address the House of Lords. But, though not a great orator, he had in a high degree some of the qualities of a statesman. He chose his friends well. And he had, in an extraordinary degree, the art of attaching them to him by ties of the most honourable kind. The cheerful fidelity with which they adhered to him through many years of almost hopeless opposition was less admirable than the disinterestedness and delicacy which they showed when he rose to power. Canada, Rockingham, Nova Scotia, United States, Rockingham County, New Hampshire, Rockingham County, North Carolina, Rockingham County, Virginia, Rockingham, Vermont, Rockingham, North Carolina, Wentworth, North Carolina. Rockingham's first government, July 1765 July 1766. the Marquess of Rockingham a Euro First Lord of the Treasury and Leader of the House of Lords, the Earl of Northington a Euro Lord Chancellor, the Earl of Winchelsea a Euro Lord President of the Council, the Duke of Newcastle upon Tyne a Euro Lord Privy Seal, William Dowdeswell a Euro Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Duke of Grafton a Euro Secretary of State for the Northern Department, Henry Seymour Conway a Euro Secretary of State for the Southern Department and Leader of the House of Commons, Marquess of Granby a Euro Master General of the Ordnance, the Earl of Egmont a Euro First Lord of the Admiralty, HRH the Duke of Cumberland a Euro Minister without portfolio, changes, October 1765 a Euro the Duke of Cumberland dies. May 1766 a Euro the Duke of Grafton resigns from the Cabinet. Henry Seymour Conway succeeds him as Northern Secretary, and the Duke of Richmond succeeds Conway as Southern Secretary. Rockingham's second government, March a Euro July 1782. The Marquess of Rockingham a Euro First Lord of the Treasury, Leader of the House of Lords, the Lord Thurlon a Euro Lord Chancellor, the Lord Camden a Euro Lord President of the Council, the Duke of Grafton a Euro Lord Privy Seal, the Earl of Shelburne a Euro Secretary of State for the Home Department, Charles James Fox a Euro Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Leader of the House of Commons, the Viscount Keppel a Euro First Lord of the Admiralty, Henry Seymour Conway a Euro Commander-in-Chief of the Forces, the Duke of Richmond a Euro Master General of the Ordnance, Lord John Cavendish a Euro Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Lord Ashburton a Euro Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Titles: The Honourable Charles Watson-Wentworth, Viscount Higham, Earl of Malton, the RT. Honourable the Earl of Malton, the Most Honourable the Marquess of Rockingham, the Most Honourable the Marquess of Rockingham, KG, the Most Honourable the Marquess of Rockingham, KG, PC. Ancestry. Notes. Farrell, S.M. Wentworth, Charles Watson, 2nd Marquess of Rockingham. Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Oxford University Press. doi, 10.1093288878. Cited as Rocco DNB. References, W. M. Ellefson, The Rockingham Connection and the Second Founding of the Whig Party, 1768 a Euro 1773. S. M. Farrell, a Euro Wentworth, Charles Watson, 2nd Marquess of Rockingham a Euro Unregistered Trademark, Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, Oxford University Press, September 2004. Online Eden, January 2008, accessed October 17, 2009. Ross J. S. Hoffman, The Marquis. A Study of Lord Rockingham, 1730 a Euro 1782. Paul Langford, The First Rockingham Administration 1765 a Euro 1766. Paul Langford, A Polite and Commercial People. England 1727 a Euro 1783. Frank Oman, The Rise of Party in England. The Rockingham Whigs. 1760 a Euro 1782. Further reading, Seekelia, a Euro The Rockinghams and Yorkshire Politics, 1742 a Euro 61 a Euro Unregistered Trademark, The Thoresby Miscellany, 12, Thoresby Society, 41, pages 352 a Euro 82. A. Cox and A. Cox, Rockingham Pottery and Porcelain, 1745 a Euro 1842. G. H. Guttridge, The Early Career of Lord Rockingham, 1730 a Euro 1765. R. J. Hopper, a Euro the Second Marquis of Rockingham, Coin Collector a Euro Unregistered Trademark, Antiquaries Journal, 62, pages 316 a Euro 46. G. Thomas, Earl of Albemarle, G. T. Keppel, Memoirs of the Marquis of Rockingham and His Contemporaries, 2 vols, Abirag, a Euro the Rockingham Mausoleum a Euro Unregistered Trademark, Yorkshire Archaeological Journal, 52, pages 157 a Euro 66. External links, more about Charles Wentworth, Marquess of Rockingham, genealogics.com, thepeerage.com.